Hello, and welcome to this session of Scrum Master Certification course. We will be taking up another phase in Scrum called the Review and Retrospect phase. So let's get started with it. The Review and Retrospect phase is concerned with reviewing the deliverables and the work that has been done, and determining ways to improve the practices and methods used to do project work. In large organizations, the review and retrospect processes may also include convening Scrum of Scrums meetings. Review and retrospect, as defined in a Guide to the Scrum Body of Knowledge, or SBOK guide, is applicable to portfolios, programs, and/or projects in any industry. Products, services, or any other results to be delivered to stakeholders, projects of any size or complexity. Moving on. Let's now have an overview of the review and retrospect phase processes, which are as follows. First of all, we will be talking about convene Scrum of Scrums as the first process. In this process, Scrum Team representatives convene Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meetings, in predetermined intervals, or whenever required to collaborate and track their respective progress, impediments, and dependencies across teams. This is relevant only for large projects where multiple Scrum teams are involved. Demonstrate and validate Sprint is the second process followed. In this process, the Scrum team demonstrates the Sprint deliverables to the product owner and relevant stakeholders in a Sprint review meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to secure approval and acceptance of the product or service by the product owner. The third process is Retrospect Sprint. In this process, the Scrum Master and Scrum Team meet to discuss the lessons learned throughout the sprint. This information is documented as lessons learned which can be applied to future sprints. Often, as a result of this discussion, there may be agreed actionable improvements or updated Scrum Guidance Body recommendations. We will be talking about the first process called Convene Scrum of Scrums. So let's get started with the inputs for the process. First of all, let's consider the Scrum Master, or Scrum Team representatives, act as the source of input. Normally, one member from each Scrum team will represent his or her team in the Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meeting. In most cases, this is the Scrum Master, but at times someone else may represent the team. A single person may be nominated by the team to represent them in every SOS meeting, or the representative may change over time based on who can best fulfill the role depending on current issues and circumstances. Each person involved in the meeting should have the technical understanding to be able to identify instances in which teams could cause each other impediments or delays. Moving on, the tool being used to carry out review and retrospect is the Scrum of Scrum meetings. These are preferably short meetings where a representative from each Scrum team meets to share status of the respective teams. The Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meeting, is held at predetermined intervals or when required by Scrum teams to facilitate the sharing of information among different Scrum teams. Issues, dependencies, and risks impacting multiple Scrum teams can be closely monitored, which helps the various teams working on a large project better coordinate and integrate their work. It is the responsibility of the Chief Scrum Master or another Scrum Master who facilitates the SOS meetings to ensure that all representatives have an environment conducive to open and honest sharing of information, including feedback to other team representatives. For larger projects involving a significant number of teams, multiple levels of these meetings can be convened to share the status of the respective teams. Since Scrum favors small teams, one may think that this method can only be used on small projects. But this is not the case. Scrum can also be used effectively on large-scale projects. When more than 10 people are required to carry out the work, multiple Scrum teams may be formed. The project team consists of multiple Scrum teams working together to create deliverables and product releases, so as to achieve outcomes desired for the overall project. Since a project can have multiple Scrum teams working in parallel, coordination between different teams becomes important. The Scrum teams usually communicate and coordinate with each other in a variety of ways, but the most common approach is known as a Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meeting. Members representing each Scrum team come together to discuss progress, issues, and to coordinate activities between teams. These meetings are similar in format to the daily stand-up meetings. However, The frequency of the Scrum of Scrums could be at predetermined intervals or coordinated as required by the different Scrum teams. A Scrum of Scrums meeting is an important element when scaling Scrum to large projects. Typically, there is one representative in the meeting from each Scrum team, usually the Scrum Master. But it is also common for anyone from the Scrum team to attend the meeting if required. This meeting is usually facilitated by the Chief Scrum Master and is intended to focus on areas of coordination and integration between different Scrum teams. This meeting is conducted at predetermined intervals or when required by the Scrum teams. In organizations that have several Scrum teams working on portions of a project simultaneously, the SOS meeting can be scaled up another level to what is referred to as a Scrum of Scrums meeting. In this situation, an SOS meeting is held to coordinate each group of Scrum teams working on portions of a related project, and then a Scrum of Scrums meeting may be held to coordinate and integrate projects at a higher level. Teams have to carefully evaluate the benefit of having Scrum of Scrums meetings, as the third layer adds a significant amount of logistical complexity. We have a diagram here to illustrate the concept of the Scrum of Scrums, or SOS, and the Scrum of Scrums meeting. In this example, there are 6 Scrum teams working simultaneously. Scrum teams A, B, and C are working on portions of a related project, while Scrum teams D, E, and F are working on portions of another related project. A Scrum of Scrums meeting is held to coordinate the interdependencies between the related projects. A Scrum of Scrums meeting may then be conducted to coordinate and manage dependencies across all projects. The next tool being used is the set of 4 questions per team. In this, each Scrum team representative will provide updates for his or her team in turn. These updates are usually provided in the form of answers to 4 specific questions. What has my team been working on since the last meeting? What will my team do until the next meeting? What were other teams counting on our team to finish that remains undone? And 4, what is our team planning on doing that might affect other teams? The answers to these 4 questions provide information that allows each team to clearly understand the work status of all other teams. Now it is the turn of outputs being generated. Better team coordination is output created. The Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meeting, facilitates coordination of work across multiple Scrum teams. This is especially important when there are tasks involving inter-team dependencies. Incompatibilities and discrepancies between the work and deliverables of different teams are quickly exposed. This forum also gives teams the opportunity to showcase their achievements and give feedback to other teams. By using the SOS meeting, there is collaboration across the organization, as opposed to people working in closed teams concerned primarily with their individual responsibilities. We will be learning about the second process, demonstrate and validate sprint. Let's see what are the inputs required to start the process. The source of input in this process is undoubtedly the Scrum core team. So, how will we define the Scrum core team? There are 3 core roles in Scrum that are ultimately responsible for meeting the project objectives. The core roles are the product owner, Scrum Master, and Scrum Team. Together, they are referred to as the Scrum core team. It is important to note that of these 3 roles, no role has authority over the others. Let's meet them one by one. First of all, we will learn about the product owner. The product owner is the person responsible for maximizing business value for the project. He or she is responsible for articulating customer requirements and maintaining business justification for the project. The product owner represents the voice of the customer. Corresponding to a product owner role in a project, there could be a program product owner for a program or a portfolio product owner for a portfolio. Here comes the next important person in the team, the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is a facilitator who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the product's development successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project, clears impediments for the team, and ensures that Scrum processes are being followed. Note that the Scrum Master role is very different from the role played by the project manager in a traditional waterfall model of project management, in which the project manager works as a manager or leader for the project. The Scrum Master only works as a facilitator, and he or she is at the same hierarchical level as anyone else in the Scrum team. Any person from the Scrum team who learns how to facilitate Scrum projects can become the Scrum Master for a project or for a sprint. Corresponding to a Scrum Master role in a project, there could be a Program Scrum Master for a program or a Portfolio Scrum Master for a portfolio. Now, it's time to meet the team. So we have the Scrum team here. The Scrum team is a group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the business requirements specified by the product owner, estimating user stories, and final creation of the project deliverables. We have a diagram here to give a clear understanding of the core Scrum team roles. Moving on, another important source of input is the sprint deliverables. At the end of each sprint, a product increment or deliverable is completed. The deliverable should possess all features and functionality defined in the user stories included in the sprint and should have been tested successfully. Next source of input is the sprint backlog. The list of the tasks to be executed by the Scrum team in the upcoming sprint is called the sprint backlog. It is common practice that the sprint backlog is represented on a Scrum board or task board, which provides a constantly visible depiction of the status of the user stories in the backlog. Also included in the sprint backlog are any risks associated with the various tasks. Any mitigating activities to address the identified risks would also be included as tasks in the sprint backlog. Once the sprint backlog is finalized and committed to by the Scrum team, new user stories should not be added. However, tasks that might have been missed or overlooked from the committed user stories may need to be added. If new requirements arise during a sprint, they will be added to the overall prioritized product backlog and included in a future sprint. We have the done criteria as another important source of input to discuss now. Done criteria are a set of rules that are applicable to all user stories. A clear definition of done is critical because it removes ambiguity from requirements and helps the team adhere to mandatory quality norms. This clear definition is used to create the done criteria that are an output of the create prioritized product backlog process. A user story is considered done when it is demonstrated to and approved by the product owner who judges it on the basis of the done criteria and the user story acceptance criteria. The table shows an example of the done criteria. It is about a project to design the new variants of a popular sports car at LRA Limited. The done criteria listed for the project are as follows. The design is approved by the Technical Excellence Division. The prototype passes all wind tunnel tests mandated by the Aerodynamics Division. The design is cleared for production by the Intellectual Property Division. The design safety expectations are corroborated by the Safety Division's Design Safety Report. The cost estimation report for the design is approved by the Finance Division. Now, we're going to see the role of the user stories and acceptance criteria as a source of input in the process. Every user story has an associated acceptance criteria. User stories are subjective, so the acceptance criteria provide the objectivity required for the user story to be considered as done or not done during the sprint review. Acceptance criteria provide clarity to the team on what is expected of the user story, remove the ambiguity from requirements, and help in aligning expectations. The product owner defines and communicates the acceptance criteria to the Scrum team. In the sprint review meetings, the acceptance criteria provide the context for the product owner to decide if a user story has been completed satisfactorily. It is important and the responsibility of the Scrum Master to ensure that the product owner does not change the acceptance criteria of a committed user story in the middle of a sprint. The Scrum team must ensure that defined acceptance criteria are appropriate for the user stories and provide clarity regarding the requirements to the Scrum team. Acceptance testing refers to the assessment of the ability of the completed deliverable to meet its acceptance criteria. This provides information to the product owner to help make a decision about approving or rejecting the deliverable. When developing user story acceptance criteria, the following should be considered. Acceptance criteria should not be vague, ambiguous, or too generalized. Defined acceptance criteria should ensure that the team is able to verify that the outcomes are in alignment with the sponsor organization's goals and objectives. So we have our inputs ready. What are we waiting for? Let's see the tools available to make use of the inputs. The tool being used in this process is the Sprint Review Meeting. The Scrum core team members and relevant stakeholders participate in sprint review meetings to accept the deliverables which meet the user story acceptance criteria and reject unacceptable deliverables. These meetings are convened at the end of every sprint. The Scrum team demonstrates the achievements from the sprint, including the new functionalities or products created. This provides an opportunity for the product owner and stakeholders to inspect what has been completed so far and to determine if any changes should be made in the project or processes in subsequent sprints. Well, it's time to see the outputs of the process. The main output generated is the accepted deliverables. Deliverables which meet the user story acceptance criteria are accepted by the product owner. The objective of a sprint is to create potentially shippable deliverables, or product increments, which meet the acceptance criteria defined by the customer and product owner. These are considered accepted deliverables that may be released to the customer if they so desire. A list of accepted deliverables is maintained and updated after each sprint review meeting. If a deliverable does not meet the defined acceptance criteria, it is not considered accepted and will usually be carried forward into a subsequent sprint to rectify any issues. This is highly undesirable because the objective of every sprint is for the deliverables to meet the criteria for acceptance. We're going to talk about the last process in this phase, Retrospect Sprint. Well, inputs play a major role in the processing of any data. What are the sources of input for Retrospect Sprint? Let's start with a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master is a facilitator and servant leader who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the project successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project, clears impediments for the team, and ensures that the Scrum processes are being followed. It is the responsibility of the product owner to identify the Scrum Master for a Scrum project. Next is the Scrum Team. The Scrum Team, sometimes referred to as the development team, is a group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the business requirements specified by the product owner, estimating user stories, and final creation of the project deliverables. Scrum teams are cross-functional and self-organizing. The team decides the amount of work to commit to in a sprint and determines the best way to perform the work. The Scrum team consists of cross-functional team members who carry out all the work involved in creating potentially shippable deliverables, including development, testing, quality assurance, etc. Identifying the Scrum team is the responsibility of the product owner, often in consultation with the Scrum Master. The outputs from Demonstrate and Validate Sprint are also used as a source of input. Accepted deliverables is the most important output generated as part of Demonstrate and Validate Sprint process. Deliverables which meet the user story acceptance criteria are accepted by the product owner. The objective of a sprint is to create potentially shippable deliverables, or product increments, which meet the acceptance criteria defined by the customer and product owner. These are considered accepted deliverables that may be released to the customer if they so desire. A list of accepted deliverables is maintained and updated after each sprint review meeting. If a deliverable does not meet the defined acceptance criteria, it is not considered accepted and will usually be carried forward into a subsequent sprint to rectify any issues. This is highly undesirable because the objective of every sprint is for the deliverables to meet the criteria for acceptance. It's time to see the tool used to work on the inputs being provided. In this process, Retrospect Sprint Meeting. The Retrospect Sprint Meeting is an important element of the Inspect-Adapt Scrum framework, and it is the final step in a sprint. All Scrum Team members attend the meeting, which is facilitated or moderated by the Scrum Master. It is recommended but not required for the product owner to attend. One team member acts as a scribe and documents discussions and items for future action. It is essential to hold this meeting in an open and relaxed environment to encourage full participation by all team members. Discussions in the Retrospect Sprint Meeting encompass both what went wrong and what went right. Primary objectives of the meeting are to identify 3 specific items, namely, things the team needs to keep doing, best practices, things the team needs to begin doing, process improvements, and things the team needs to stop doing, process problems and bottlenecks. These areas are discussed and a list of agreed actionable improvements is created. So what do you think will be the output if this process is called Retrospect Sprint? Well, agreed actionable improvements are the primary output of the Retrospect Sprint process. They are the list of actionable items that the team has come up with to address problems and improve processes in order to enhance their performance in future sprints. Thank you for watching this video of Scrum Master Certification course.